Welcome back to BRAP. We are live. We have David Jaffe in the house. We're going to be discussing politics and video games, but let's officially kick off the show right now. All right. Welcome back to BRAP, everyone. We got David Jaffe in the house. Jaffe, it's been, it hasn't been too long. I think we had you on a couple months ago, but always a pleasure to have you on.
It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk a little bit about politics, the pandemic, and some video games. Talk some video games.
Okay.
But I really wanted to discuss some politics with you because when we first had you on, back in 2015. That was the first time you were on the show.
Oh, yeah. I think I was calling in from my office in downtown. Yeah.
Yep. And it was right before the election. And we had a guest on at the time, and we were discussing the election and, Donald Trump, stuff like that. And I think we had to end the show, but I always wanted to have you back on to discuss politics. One, I think you have some very insightful views when it comes to politics and things that are going on. In the world today, not everything, not just in gaming, but just in general life per se. But so this is something I've been wanting to talk about too for a long time because we're in the midst of a pandemic, right? And
that's what I hear.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if I believe it.
Yeah, right. Apparently the Earth is flat too, but
that's what I hear too. Yeah.
Yeah, and global warming is not real, but. So what's interesting is we're in the middle of this pandemic, and I have been fascinated by the response here in the United States. I really thought that when the pandemic hit in 2020, that despite, because I really do think that we went through a time where, politically speaking, we're probably, at least from what I can remember, I'm 44. So my memories of presidents go back to Ronald Reagan. I don't recall, and I could be wrong, but I don't recall the country being maybe this divided politically speaking. And I felt like during the Trump administration, like we were kind of like, I felt like the country was kind of really being, ripped apart per se. And then I said, the pandemic's here, and, throughout American history, Americans typically, in times of crisis and trouble, you go back to 9/11. When that happened, you think of World War II. When Japan attacked Hawaii, we came together as a country. We kind of we rallied, right? Put our differences aside, rally. I thought that would happen during this pandemic. I really did. I'm thinking like, this is a public health crisis. There's no way politics can get into this. And I was wrong, sorely wrong. Where, if anyone saw my my thumbnail for tonight's show, there's a picture that has a surgical mask that says the symbol of tyranny, the new symbol of tyranny.
Yeah.
And my God, I'm thinking to myself, what's happened? How do we get to this point, Jaffe? Like we talked a little bit pre-show. I majored in sociology, so a lot of this stuff kind of fascinates me. Human behavior, things like that. Why people react to the way the things they do, people's thought process, how they process things. But to me, there's things that, and I don't want to get. I had this conversation with my cousin the other day. We talked about religion, how people will put so much faith in religion, and it comes to science. It's like, and science is something that's tangible in a lot of ways, right? We have data, we have things to show that things are real per se, right? I always view science as the closest thing to the truth. And then we have people that will put so much faith, and I see this in my own family. We have people, my family's very religious, by the way, Jaffe. They're Catholics. I'm first generation here. My parents are from South America, so religion is very big in our culture. And so, someone said in the live chat, I don't think I've ever seen Jaffe not talk for so long. That's great.
I'm just listening. I'm listening.
Yeah. So, my point is, I see, and I see some of these people, and I use my family example, very religious, that they'll put faith in things that religion isn't maybe necessarily, again, in my opinion, tangible per se, like science is, right? And they don't believe in things like the vaccines or, that masks work and things like that. But this thing got politicized at some point, Jaffe. It blows my mind, because what I'm seeing here in the U.S. is almost a lack. Someone said, "Get to the point." I'm getting to the point, I promise. What I'm seeing here is kind of a lack of empathy by people to take care of their fellow, their next door neighbor, the brothers and sisters that live in the community, right? By doing something as simple as wearing a mask. And somehow that mask has become a symbol of tyranny, of oppression, of, you can't make me wear a mask, you're violating my rights. Like, how do we get here, Jaffe? In the middle of a pandemic?
Well, I think, okay, so here's my theory on how we got here. I think we got here because, first off, I think we've been divided for a long time, but there hasn't been gasoline poured on the fire, and the gasoline was, or is, social media. The gasoline is social media that I don't think it necessarily needs to be regulated. I believe in private companies being able to express themselves, but if you're going to have that, you need media literacy on the part of the public, certainly on the part of kids going through school. But you're going to have a hard time getting that. It's how do I articulate this? It's basically a situation where you've got all these people with vested interest in keeping us separate. And in that, so everyone from Donald Trump, who I thought was a horrible president. I think, even though I didn't agree with a lot of the things George Bush did, it was clear the guy's heart was in the right place. He wasn't the brightest, crayon in the box. And he wasn't I didn't agree with a lot of him philosophically, but it was clear when 9/11 happened and you're talking about how the country came together, there wasn't an intent on his part to politicize it, or if there was, it was to politicize it as us, meaning Americans, or the West versus them. And I think with Trump, so the three things that are all come together, I think Trump remains such a problematic figure for the Republican Party because he is Machiavellian in the worst sense of the word. He doesn't really care about anything except himself. There is no sense of service. There is no sense of greater good. There is no sense of sort of his commitment to the people he vowed to serve. I don't think the man's ever probably read the Constitution of the United States of America in my life. And so I think that a guy will, even there's news coming out this week where Trump was talking, just some of the things he said that are now being reported by attorney generals or attorneys general and certain governor assistants about him wanting to invalidate the election. It was all about him. So there was that. They're the social media companies that make a lot of money by feeding people exactly what they want to hear. Their job is not to educate people, and their job is not to let you see how they do their smoke and mirrors. Whether those smoke and mirrors are appealing to people on the left or progressives like me, or they're appealing to people who are very religious and conservative like your family, they don't care. They want to keep serving you up the shit that will keep you scrolling, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got the 24-hour cable news stuff. And they are vested in making their money by I don't think they consciously go, let's keep people divided, but they absolutely go, this is a story that our demographic will really hook into, and we're not going to worry too much. We'll leave it up to them to monitor themselves, which I guess, yes, that's what responsible adults should do. But we'll just keep reporting on this shit over and over and over in the most sensational ways and not really, have nuance, I think. And then the last thing, I know I'm talking a lot, I'm sorry, but the last thing is, I think the Democrats, really dropped the ball during the Obama administration. I liked Obama as a human. I don't really know enough about him as a president. There were a few things he did I didn't like, but he seemed like his heart was in the right place, and I liked him as a guy. But there was, I have this conversation with people. I talked to people last night about it. It's like, would you rather be right, or would you rather solve the problem? Or would you rather feel pious and good, or would you rather solve the problem? So it's easy to look at the others in your world, in this case, racist and anti-Semites and all of that stuff. And yes, of course, naturally you want to pull them out into the light. You want to make fun of them. You want to take away their power, as you should. At the same time, though, there are ramifications to that. And I think the adulation a lot of the right has to Trump is because they're like, when, he was the only guy that was really speaking to them. And he was the only guy that was really speaking their language. I think, look, I seriously considered voting for Jeb Bush when he was in the primaries. I seriously thought about, even though I learned stuff about him that turned me off to him, John Kasich in the primaries. But Donald Trump was the guy who stood up there and said, I know you guys are tired of all this artifice. The very first thing he said in the first debate was about Rosie O'Donnell. And it was the biggest applause line of that evening. When have you ever heard about Rosie O'Donnell or celebrities or tabloids or any of that shit being brought up at a fucking presidential primary? Never. And so he's the guy who's basically like, I'm going to speak to these people. And in doing so, they felt heard. And so you've got Trump fucking it up, the Democrats during Obama really not reaching out to the other side. I don't mean politically with the Republican controlled Senate and House. I mean, in terms of the population sort of feeling like we can mock you, redneck, red state, flyover state people. Haha, fuck you. And then you've got social media, and then you've got the cable networks, right? So when you say, how did we get here? Everybody has a vested interest in putting us here. Everybody did things that felt good at the time, whether it was for their wallet or for their egos, me included, that put us in this situation that we're in right now. Because, yeah, the idea that people are politicizing wearing a mask is, I mean, all of the arguments from the people who don't believe in vaccination when it comes to COVID, wearing masks when it comes to COVID, that COVID's a hoax, on and on and on. All of those are so easily stripped down and sort of pushed off into the closet of irrelevancy, that they're coming from a place of emotion. They're not coming from a place of logic.
Yeah, and that's, again, I'm not trying to pick on my family here, but that's kind of where my family is coming from. A lot of it's emotion, but even then, I mean, it goes back to the thing that I keep seeing is, like, people have died from this. A lot of people, like what, 600,000, 600,000.
We're almost at 700,000, and it's going to be apparently it's going to be a terrible fall in America. America is the leading case of COVID of all time, and we're right above India and then Brazil, and we're just now getting slammed with the Delta variant. And they're saying it's worse now than it was at the height when this thing first came to us. So we'll probably get up to 1 million by the end of the year.
And that's the part that's baffling to me. Like we talk about, but I've also seen this lack of trust in science, or people thinking that the scientists don't know what they're talking about. And I do levy some criticism on the CDC. I don't think they've always necessarily maybe communicate things probably as effectively as they probably could have to the general public. Like with the one thing that gets brought up a lot is, in the beginning they told us not to wear masks, and then they tell us to wear masks. That gets brought up a lot as a talking point.
But I mean, okay, but even take that talking point for a moment. So what to bring up that talking point on the part of someone who doesn't wear a mask because the CDC changed their views, even though Fauci did explain why, which I thought was a decent reason. But regardless, what is the gotcha moment there? So, I mean, that's what science does. They also put out a video, or a lot of people were saying, I know there was like a 3-month period where I had to come home I hated grocery shopping because every time I came home, I had to get Clorox wipes and wipe down my groceries and all this shit. And it wasn't that the CDC was trying to control me. They're just like, we think this is really transmissible by touch. And then it turned out they were like, you know what? That's not correct. We were giving you the up-to-the-date information we had. It's clearly more airborne. You don't have to do that anymore. But I'm not like, the CDC lied, those bastards. I was like, yeah, that's, it's called a novel virus for a reason, because it's novel. We don't know as much about it as we do about diseases that have been around for a long time. And thus we're learning as we go. Would you rather than just say nothing? I don't hell, Trump is on the record with who's the Watergate reporter that did the book on him recently? Bernstein. Is it Bernstein?
Yeah,
Carl Woodward. I forget the Woodward. Yeah. It was one of the two guys. And you can listen to the audio tapes where Trump is literally, when the reporter, he's saying, why didn't you say anything? And he's like, well, I don't think that's my job. I want to be a cheerleader. I want to make people feel good. And so it's like, yeah, you could have had the CDC just saying nothing, but I'm grateful, but yeah, I mean, they're going to get it wrong, but I don't think there's some kind of, evil corporation.
But it's interesting. You bring up social media.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of disinformation in there on social media. And I agree with you, Jaffe, by the way. I think these companies, obviously they're privately held companies, or no, they're private companies. They should be able to kind of police themselves, or, maybe not have a lot of government involvement in them.
I think the government really needs its own social media. I think we need First Amendment protected social media that is basically government. They need their own version of Twitter, their own version of Facebook. And it would be a shitstorm. But at least you could say, and I don't mean the government is controlling it. I'm saying that it's not a private company. And thus you can apply First Amendment. And I don't mean get rid of private social media. But at least in that case, you could get rid of the claim of like, I can't get the real information. It's like, yeah, you can. If you're Donald Trump, you could never get kicked off government Twitter, because that would be a violation of freedom of speech.
Yeah, First Amendment. Yeah.
Why would they not have that? I don't know, and hopefully they will. I don't think it should replace private, but I think there should be, just like the mail company. There's UPS, there's FedEx, but you also still have the United Postal Service.
Yeah, that's interesting, Jaffe. That's and then that could be a place where they can get out that messaging, that, and kind of maybe combat that mis or disinformation that's on Facebook.
Well, it would be filled with disinformation. I mean, it would be a rat's nest, but it would be reflective of the Constitution at least, and people could not. Gotcha. You'd never have Trump going, they're shutting me up, and they wouldn't. Gotcha. They wouldn't have a right to, and I would defend his right not to be shut up. But I certainly think it's in Facebook's right to shut him up. That's not their job to give a platform to anyone they want. Yeah,
no, I agree with that. But I see a lot of the disinformation on social media, especially like Facebook. I see a lot of it where people aren't really giving context to things. And I bring up the mask wearing thing, and now people are saying, oh, the vaccines don't work. There's breakthrough infections, and I'm like, well, they never really said that there wasn't going to be breakthrough infections when the vaccines first came out.
There's breakthrough infections in everything.
Exactly. Like there's no vaccines for the most part aren't typically 100% preventive at.
Do you mind if I read you something I did see on Facebook today, just real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So there's this person who's saying, complaining about the CDC.
Yeah.
The person, the anti-vaxxer, says, so because the CDC said it, you're just going to blindly listen to them without doing your own research, right? So the response was, yes, 100% yes. What fucking research am I going to do that is going to be in any way more valid or valuable than research from a government agency that spends $6.5 billion a year on studying diseases? Do you honestly think your Google skills are worth $6.5 billion a year of scientific research done by scientists specializing in that field? And it's like, there is a lot of justified cynicism out there. I see somebody in the chat talking about all of these, pharmaceutical companies making bank and all that. Yeah, they are. But you know what? They are. But you know what? The fact of the matter is, this is the same. I don't know if they're the same people, but the conservative Republican Party are the ones that are always going on about, well, we don't want socialism. People deserve to make a living and make a lot of money and get rich if they have the better mousetrap. It's like, well, so Moderna got there, Pfizer got there, Johnson & Johnson got there, and now you're saying that they shouldn't be making money off it? I mean, look, I think healthcare should be free, but the idea that these American companies engineered a pandemic that has killed many millions all over the world and ruined the lives of so many others, both in terms of long-term ramifications of the disease and shattered families. And they've done so with the hope that they could invent an antidote in time for it. I mean, how if you're going to do that, why not have the antidote ready? It's like, we're going to let the virus out there in the world, and then we hope we can come up with a solution so we can benefit off it. It's just like, none of their shit really ever holds up. It's not that they don't have a right to be cynics, though. And that's the problem, I think, with the left on this issue, is that you have to give them, you got to give them you have to agree with them on the fact that the government in our history in the world, but certainly in America, has not done a very good job walking the walk. They say we're the best country in the world. They say we're for freedom and we're fair and all this. And in some ways we are, but in a lot of ways we get lied to. We get pushed into wars for reasons that are total lies that are proved about it later. Then nobody cares. We commit war crimes and atrocities. People go to jail for the minor things, but these executives at these companies get off scot-free. Of course, everybody in America has a right to be horrifically awfully cynical about all this stuff. So they're coming at it with, I think, a mindset that is valid, but then it gets all corrupted where it's like, that mindset is valid, but if you run everything through that filter, you're never going to believe anything. And in that, it's dangerous, and that's where we're at now.
And that's kind of where I'm confused, because to me, I get that perspective, right? That mistrust. I get that. And I think you bring up some great points about, this country isn't, as I've gotten older, I've realized, and I teach my kids this now because I wasn't taught this in school. I teach my kids real American history. I tell them about how we came here and we basically murdered Indians and we stole this country. Much to the dismay of my wife, she looks at me like I'm nuts, but I feel like
I think we can teach the good and the bad. I think you have to, if you actually want to call it history. Otherwise, call it something else. Call it fan fiction. But if you want to call it history, you want to teach the great stuff that America has done. And you want to teach the fact that we did that to the indigenous people, that we built a great deal of wealth on the backs of slavery. There's a lot of things, but, people don't really want to hear that. But it's the truth.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. And I just feel like it's important for my kids to have that, to know that, because it is part of this country's history. But and I understand that the mistrust, the cynicism, and I agree with you, Jaffe. I don't think, like again, I use my family example. I have family members that are anti-vaxxers that kind of had that perspective of they're trying to control us. They're trying to do this. The vaccines aren't safe. And I understand that, like, they have the right to that opinion, and I'm not telling them they're wrong or they should, go somewhere.
Well, they are wrong.
They are wrong. Yeah. Well, I try to present them like facts, like, okay, well, here's why the vaccine's safe. Here's some studies, etc. And even then, with some of those studies and data points, are kind of like they don't believe it, because they still have that mistrust.
You're not really debating logic. You're not like, you know what I'm saying. You're not. It's an emotional thing for people. It goes so deep that that's why I go back to: would you rather be right or would you rather be effective? Yeah. In the case of arguing with someone, if the goal is to really bring someone around to a view that you hold, or at least to consider, maybe, considering your view, facts don't usually do it. You have to understand why they're there. Like, there's a guy in your chat right now, Crazy Joe, who's like, I bet these guys don't even question 9/11. I absolutely question 9/11. I think it's valid to question 9/11. There are a great number of things and inconsistencies and weird things about that story. But I can question 9/11 and go, I think there's some big pieces of that puzzle that have not been left out, without buying hook, line, and sinker into a lot of the things that you can easily explain away. Right. And it's like, I think that's part of the problem, is people on the right feel like the left are making fun of them for being stupid all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of them are stupid, but some of them on the left are stupid too.
Yep.
But, and then people on the right think that the people on the left aren't American or aren't tough. Like you got another guy in your chats, like the virus is going to be around. His name is Yup Yup. That tells you all you need to know. Yup Yup says the virus will never go away. It's time to either keep being scared of dying or just go live your life. It's just like, that's what a lot of people on the right think about people like us on the left. I assume you're on the left or progressive or whatever, which is well, first off, everyone is scared of dying, not because of COVID, but that's just sort of wired into the lizard brain aspect of our evolution. But his point being, it's like, it's not about being scared of dying, but when you get on the freeway, you put on a seatbelt. You don't go into a bad area of town at 2:00 in the morning, carrying a bunch of gold watches and money coming out of your pockets and go, I'm not scared of getting mugged. It's like, well, you're probably a moron then. But there's a difference between living in total fear and going, there are some steps you could take to not only protect yourself and your family, but other people who are very vulnerable to this. And it's like, why, you know.
So Jaffe, that I hear that a lot. People are like, "Oh, you're like I'm going to use my family. I'm not scared. I'm going to live my life." My mom had that conversation with me a million times. You know, my mom's a cancer survivor, by the way. I had to, and I
yeah.
That's the one person, by the way, Jaffe, that I was on every day. Mom, you need to get vaccinated.
Did she ever get it?
Vaccinated. She did eventually.
Good.
She got it, but it was like it took her doctor, it took her cardiologist, it took myself. And it basically got to the point where I said, look, I can't, if you want to see your grandkids, I can't have you around them if you're not vaccinated. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not going to happen.
We did the same with grandkids of absolutely.
Yeah. And so, you know, she did, but it was that attitude of I'm going to live my life and I'm not going to live my life in fear. And I'm like, well, it's not really fear as much as it's protect. Like you wear a seatbelt, not because you're afraid of getting to an accident, dying. You're wearing a seatbelt because if that happens, then you take it a step to that could potentially save your life, right? Or reduce injury.
Or go away and your kids won't have a dad. I mean, there's it's not, but again, I understand why the right is upset. And again, I'm not some guy who's just like a Zen monk who's always measured. I get frustrated and furious and mad about this as well all the time. But for whatever reason, we're having a conversation on a day where I'm able to kind of be a little bit calm about it and recognize that when they push back and say something like, it's a hoax or you're afraid or all that, you know, when you're in a better mindset, sometimes you can look at that and go, what is motivating that? You know, what is it about being able to say you're afraid and I'm not, that pops some dopamine off in their brains that makes them go, I like picturing myself that way. And it makes me feel good to look at the other side as wimps. Like there's a sense of control or there's a sense of satisfaction that I get in my life because I'm painting that image to myself of me. Now we look at them like they're idiots when they say it, but you know, that's okay. They don't care. They're seeing it through their filter. Right. So I think it is such a deep, what is it, a Gordian knot? Is that the famous biblical story that wasn't it the knot that King Solomon or King David had just cut down the middle? I don't know.
I don't remember.
But it's got so many tentacles in it of why we are where we're at, that it really is how this gets untangled other than revolution, physical revolution, that basically one side wins and goes, this is America 2.0. I don't know. When you literally have people trying to attack, or not even attacking the Capitol building, and those people who supported it and those people who did it are not in jail. And it's even you saw it with your own eyes on video. You saw it. This is not, I mean, they were, I mean, I don't understand. But
you know, my kids saw that happening.
Yeah.
And I said, you guys need to come over here, sit down and watch this. And my wife's like, what are you doing? I was like, they need to see this. And then I had a conversation with them about it.
Yes.
You know, why this happened and how that behavior is not okay. It's okay to say, you know what, I don't believe that this election is legitimate, whatever the case is, right? To voice your
it's
displeasure.
Dumb. It's dumb. Yeah. And I don't mean that like the Republicans are dumb, but you know, even Donald Trump's task force that was set up to prove the election he won he was claiming was illegitimate. He was planting these seeds back in the day. Literally, his attorney general came to him and said, "We haven't found anything," and they disbanded it. So I think if you want to say the election was fraudulent, that's fine, but you have to actually point to some actual evidence. And a lot of times people point you to stuff that's like, that's either been debunked or you're showing something that's
the Mr.
so
Pillow
clearly,
guy.
yeah, I mean,
he's still at it.
You can find anybody to tell you anything. It's like but anyway, so I think that's why we're at where we're at. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't have a lot of faith. I think greed is such a huge driver of humanity, especially when it comes to fear, that sort of motivates us to be greedy because we're afraid. I don't know what's going to come along. Maybe that's why the aliens are showing up in the skies more these days. It's like, look, you guys are getting towards doomsday 0 clock hour 0. And if we don't intervene, shit's going to go really bad for you guys, because I don't think you can intellectualize your way out of this problem.
Interesting. Wow. But you mentioned like emotion though. For me though, when I brought up how many people have died and obviously the ripple effects that this has, that somebody's action in their community they live in can have, right?
Yes.
If they get this virus and they give it to someone who doesn't have a good outcome, ends up in the hospital, right? But what happened to empathy though? Even with all that emotion, just empathy. Like
empathy is, well, keep going. I have a response, but keep going.
Yeah, and that's the part that like for me, it's like I don't care what side of the political aisle you fall on. I'm gonna get vaccinated. I'm gonna wear my mask. I'm gonna do things to protect people in my community, not just myself, but my family, but others that I'm around, because I don't want something to happen to them. I don't want them. If I inadvertently, because I'm not taking the steps necessary to protect myself, and I get infected and I give it to someone else, right? And they end up getting really sick in the hospital, like that's preventable. Like that doesn't have to happen.
Yeah, but neither do drunk driving accidents. Neither do, there's a comedian a friend of mine loves, a guy named Tony Baker, whose son just died 2 nights ago, 21-year-old kid.
Oh, it's terrible.
In a car crash. And it was a car crash because a bunch of kids were doing Fast and Furious street racing in Burbank, and they killed 3 young adults. Right. Well, that's preventable. Yeah. But the problem is, I mean, you can get into a really deep conversation at this point, right? Because, my theory on it is that, and I'm not a religious person, and I think religion, at least for most people, has worn out its welcome a while ago, and it's dangerous now, and it's problematic now. Not spirituality, not questioning, not only believing what science tells you, but the idea of literally following the 10 Commandments and the Bible and the Quran and the Torah and all that. I think it's time we sort of evolve from that. But the problem is, what that did give us was, when people believed in it more, it did a good job of putting guardrails up for a lot of people's behavior, because there was a fear of going to hell, or there was a fear that God is watching, or there was a sense of I need to be a good person. The good news is that's gone away, because it was fairy tales and it's holding us back. It hasn't gone away yet, but it's getting, every generation, fewer and fewer people are believing this, what I consider horseshit. But the negative is we've had nothing to replace it with, right? Joseph Campbell's kind of talked about this, is that, every living, thinking human needs a myth. They need their myths. And if you don't have that, and it hasn't been replaced with something, then unless you just happen to be raised really well, motivation to be empathetic. And when you're living in a society that, in America, that doesn't have a lot of social safety nets, you can't afford your medicine, you get sick, you're bankrupt, fuck you, it's dog eat dog, third place, second place, a set of steak knives,
individualism, yeah,
you're fired. That becomes, every family for themselves, and it just builds on top of it. And so I think it's good we're losing religion, but I think it's bad we haven't figured out what to replace it with that makes sense in 2021, but still helps us get in touch with the fact that everybody's a human. Even the person, I'm not looking at the chat that much, but even anybody in the chat right now, that is, I'm sure there's always somebody mocking me or telling me I'm an idiot or hating me or whatever. Even that individual, right? There's a reason that person wants to be heard. There's a reason they're sitting at their computer watching your show and yelling at the screen and going, "You're a fucking moron." It's like, I don't think I'm a fucking moron, but I certainly think there is a person out there that is feeling like they're not being respected with their views. Their views may be wrong, but I think there's just, we're reaching this point where we're so affected by all of this fear that this is kind of the ramifications of it. I really do think that.
Wow. It's an interesting point about religion, Jeff. I never thought of it from that perspective, being that guardrail, but I can see that point though, where you're right. And I grew up, by the way, like that. Like, again, I mentioned, my parents are from South America. I'm first generation. The Catholic religion is like, you don't dare question it, right? And it was very much a experience, very much a fear, Jaffe, where if you don't behave, you're going to hell, or the devil's going to get you, like shit like that. And and I tell my parents, I'm like, yeah, that shit kind of fucked me up a little bit. Like, like you guys, I'm like a 5-year-old kid. You're telling me I'm going to go to hell. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm 5 years old. I don't know if that shit's real, right?
At 5, you don't, but I mean, it'll fuck. We had a friend who's gone on to become a real successful screenwriter and author in college. Me and my friend, my ex-wife, and he's a gay guy, and he knew he was gay since he was like in his teens, and his family was, I want to say they were Southern Baptist, but I don't know if it was Southern Baptist, but they were fire and brimstone Christians.
Yep.
And it wasn't just you're going to hell. It was you're going to get your skin flayed off. You're going to be screaming in the pits of hell. You are an abomination. If I could kick you out of my house and not get arrested, I would. And this guy is an alcoholic now. Wow. He had nothing. Right. So I'm a big fan of religion dissolving, but I hope we survive as a species long enough for us to replace it with something that still feels believable. Right. I don't know. I mean, I think we'd all be better off if we could all just sit down and admit that we don't know. We don't know what put us here, if anything. Was it random? Maybe. Are we in a simulation? Was it a conscious being that said, I want to create this, and we happen to be the creation of that being? I don't know.
Was it Unicron?
Yeah, but no one knows.
No one knows here. I say Unicron because I watched the Transformers last night.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't even know that reference. So, but I'm old, so I would say, was it George Burns? And people would go, what? I think it's just so, it's so scary in some ways to be alive, right? There's so much, we're well beyond cave people, obviously. We're well beyond that. But in a lot of ways, we still don't really know. People die and they're gone forever, as far as we know. They just stop existing. Yeah. That's a terrifying thought if you really drill down, right? Yeah. We don't know if all of this is a construct and you're a figment of my imagination. And all these, none of this is real. I'm a brain. There's so much. That's right. And so the idea that there was a time where those kind of thoughts were very limited. You either had to be like a fucking hippie or a druggie or whatever. And those thoughts are a lot more mainstream. And I think that's wonderful that they're mainstream and people are questioning this stuff. But what it's done is, I think it's made people, especially as religion has faded, it's made people look around and go, what the fuck is happening? What is this shit? We had this total made up story, but at least it made me feel safe at night. I could go to bed and know if I was good. My mom who just died, I'll see her again one day. You don't know shit. She's rotting in the ground, quite possibly. And that's it. Right. Yeah. And so I definitely think there's a value of compassion that is needed, not because, I want to placate the people who aren't wearing masks, but because if you drill down to the emotion, you're a sociologist, you would know this more than I, but I think if you drill down to the emotion under that, I think it's very easy to be empathetic. It's like, you're just as scared as I am. We just express it in different ways.
Yeah. I was going to say that we're expressing in different ways. And that could be that mindset. And I go back to my family again, where for my mother, it was, I'm not afraid. Therefore, I'm not going to stop living my life. And she did that because it made her feel good. It gave her a sense of control. Right. And that's what it was. So it very much, there's definitely a lot of psychology behind this, and that the emotional response, if you will, to what has really been And I even think about my own experience the last year, Jaffe. I may look back at this and be like, holy shit, there's probably a lot of emotions that I'm feeling now that I'm not self-aware of yet that may come up to surface when this thing's over, right? Where I might be like, holy shit, wait a minute. Like I was in a bad place and I didn't realize it, maybe I was a little depressed, or you know what I mean? Like, or just very stressed, Let me grab the super chat from my good buddy BitCloud Game with the $5 super chat. Says, "What's up, Enrique? Good to see David Jaffe here. Thank you for that, BitCloud. Appreciate it."
Goddamn right.
And let me grab this other super chat here from my good buddy Gaming Forte with the $5 super chat. He goes, "Yo, I knew it. Santa Claus is real. Great show and conversation, BRAP. Nice to see you back in the arcade, Jaffe."
It's good to be here, baby. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I love the pipe, by the way, Jaffe. I'm a big fan of
that. Oh, somebody sent me this. I love this pipe. I don't smoke it. Ooh, I love this pipe. Yeah. Great. And I had to buy a new one of these because it broke because I chew it so much. But I found these on Amazon, so I can just chew to my heart's content and just replace it.
Oh, that's awesome. But yeah, I mean, it's a very, for me, it's just an interesting time, again, to go back to what I start off with at the beginning of the show. I thought again that this would have been a rallying point for us as a country, and it just to me it's probably exposed even more. Yeah.
Well, that's because it's not. I do. I get it. How do I put this? I understand that there are laws in place to protect individuals, but you know what? At some point, they need to get cameras into these ICU rooms, and I mean, the fact that a reporter hasn't snuck in there. And really, because I was in the hospital a couple of months ago with vertigo, and it was not bad because COVID was kind of on a downswing, but they were telling me how bad it was. And it was bad at the time because the local hospital had been hacked and they were getting a lot of the overflow patients. But they're like, yeah, we're not allowed to sort of show any of it unless it's a very, scripted kind of thing for legal reasons. And I'm just like, maybe the reason a lot of people don't buy it is they don't see it. It's kind of like in Vietnam when they finally took the cameras and showed the bodies coming back, which forever they would never do in World War II because they thought it would demoralize the country. The minute they started showing the bodies coming back from overseas and the flag draped coffins, American sentiment turned away from the war for the people that were still in favor of the war, because then it became very real. And then it became very tangible, right? Right now, if you haven't been touched by COVID, or if someone has died and they call it COVID, you could say, yeah, but they were old, they were fat, they had diabetes, they were going to die anyway. And that's just what they put on the certificate because the hospital gets paid more money, or whatever the conspiracy of the week, right? But
that was my parents, by the way. That was a conversation they would have with me too. Oh, right. He didn't die of COVID. He had diabetes and
right. But so it's there's also the thing going around. It's like the number of people who died this year is the same number of people who died every year. We're just calling it COVID. It's like, well, if you actually look at the figures, that's not true. There's a surplus of death since COVID has started. It's not the same number. I understand the point they're trying to make, but it's simply not accurate, right? And it's easy to debunk those figures. But it's just, maybe it's because people aren't, I've had 2 people I know who have died of COVID. And it's like, they're not coming back, and they weren't overweight. They weren't old. I mean, they weren't like 20, but they were like 62. And they're gone. Who am I to tell you it's a hoax? I'm seeing it, but maybe a lot of the people haven't been touched by it yet. I don't know.
No, that's a great point, Jaffe. I know people who, because they haven't had the experience of COVID in their life or been impacted by it directly, they don't take it as seriously, right? It's like out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
For me, like I've no one in my family, well, actually that's not true. I've had 2 uncles that had COVID, and thankfully, nothing serious. They had like very mild symptoms, right? Both in their 60s, but they were okay. But you mentioned you knew someone that was in their 60s, had no underlying health issues, and died. And so for me, it's because I see people that are like, oh, well, my uncle had it, or my dad had it, he's fine. He was okay, not a big deal. But then you have someone who passed away who's in the same age group. Yeah. And so, to me, it's okay. Well, wait a minute. Just because, your uncle, your dad, maybe had mild symptoms doesn't make it any less serious per se, because there's someone else who had a worse outcome than you. or had a worse outcome than
Yeah,
than your
there's a
loved
lot of
one.
people who get cancer and get cured of cancer these days, but that doesn't mean
Exactly.
you don't take it serious. People can still die from it if a lot of people, Um, the other thing is the vaccine thing, and when you say, well, even if you were to say, I get that you're not terribly worried about it, but if a hurricane's coming, you board up your windows. If a tornado's coming, you go down in the basement. Why would you not be preemptive, especially when you could heal other people or you could make other people not get sick? And they're like, well, the virus isn't tested. We don't know anything about the virus. And I'm like, okay, they've been testing a variant of this virus for a while, but let's assume we're just talking it's a year and a half. Let's assume that it's the first time anybody thought about it. Okay, yes, it's not as tested as other things like your Tylenol that's been around forever, your acetaminophen or whatever, right? But that kind of thinking, if the individual is such a pure living soul, and they're like, okay, but you can't smoke, right? You don't drink aspartame, Diet Coke, right? There's a lot of things you put in your body that are found to be a lot more harmful, but you still do. And the stats show that the chances of you getting COVID or you giving COVID to somebody and it killing them are relevant. And so it's like, okay, yeah, maybe in 20 years, we're all going to grow an extra fucking penis out of our back because this thing mutated our cells. It's like,
Jaffe, why does it have to be a penis?
Well, because that way you can have sex at the same time just by going in and out like this.
My God.
Right. So that's
human evolution.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But ultimately it's like, okay, maybe that'll happen. But what we know is happening now is millions of people are dying all over the world. We're going to hit 1 million before Christmas in America. That'll be our Christmas gift. Is probably the millionth person American dies. That's happening. That's real. Okay. So yeah, you have a right to be cynical about the vaccine. You have a right to be cynical about the government, and you're fed that shit depending on what media you listen to all the time. But at the same time, just do the math, man. What are the chances of, all these people who've been for years, for decades, don't give vaccines to kids because of autism? It's like, sure, there's a percentage.
That was my family too, by the way.
Yeah, there's a percentage. But you know what? The vast majority of people who get vaccinated as kids are thriving when it comes to not catching those diseases. And they've been around for 60, 70, 80 years. Yeah. So I'm just like, it's clearly not about the science. It's not about somebody going, I've looked at the science. It's about somebody going, this means something to me emotionally. And I'm going to glom all this shit on top of it to make it sound like I'm coming from an intellectual place. But that stuff is so easy to push away. And then you're just left with the emotion. And it's like, what's really bothering you?
What's really bothering? Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, it's interesting. I have 2 sisters that do not want to get vaccinated, and they feel like the vaccines were rushed, that it's not safe, that they aren't safe. They haven't been tested long enough. And my oldest sister was like, they know what the deals with COVID is, but they're not telling us. And so I asked her, so what is it that they're not telling us? Like, what does that mean? Well, it probably came out of a lab, and
maybe it did.
I said, well, okay, maybe it did, but we don't. But what do we know? What do we know today? And I said, what do we know about COVID today? That it's highly transmissible, that it's going to mutate if we don't, get enough people vaccinated. We don't reach that herd immunity. And I said this. I said everything that the doctors talked about last year. If we don't get to a point after vaccines or when the vaccines came out, if we don't get enough people vaccinated, we run the risk of this thing mutating, because anytime COVID infects someone, it mutates like 1 million times. Right. And sometimes out of those 1 million times that it's mutating, you get a variant like the Delta variant that's out right now, which apparently is as, I don't know if you heard this, Jaffe, it's as contagious as chickenpox.
Yes. And then there's the Lambda variant, which is apparently has been found up in Seattle, I think. And that's apparently worse than the Delta variant. So,
yeah. So, and I said this, I said, look, they've been telling us this stuff, like this can happen, and it's happening right now. And I said to her, I said, you're going to see, and I remember having this conversation with her, I said, if this thing spikes again, and this is kind of when we're at the point where, remember in the US, we're like, everyone was kind of going out getting vaccinated, and we kind of hit a point and then numbers started going down. Right. Mm-hmm. And then the Delta variant hit, And then we start seeing the uptick. And what we're seeing, the biggest uptick is in like states of Louisiana, where I think 39% of the population there is actually fully vaccinated. And believe it or not, if this is according to Dr. Michael Osterholm, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. You may have seen him he's always on like the morning news shows, CNN, stuff like that. He said if Louisiana was its own country, it would have the highest COVID-19 case rate in the world. 93 cases per 100,000 residents. 37% are fully vaccinated in the state of Louisiana. So, and I said this, I said you're going to see like pockets of communities where there's low vaccine rate, where this thing is just going to erupt, and that's what we're seeing right now. And even with that being said, she's still hesitant to get us. I'm like, what are you waiting for? Are you waiting to get sick of it? Like,
it's not. Yeah, I mean, the idea of like what do you think they're not telling you about COVID? It's like there's really it's like if you do drill down to that curiosity, there is a question of like, well, what do you there's a guy in your chat right now with the unfortunate name of Biggie Butters.
Yes,
and he says expecting masks to stop the virus spreading is like expecting your underwear to stop your farts from spreading. The masks are just a symbol of control. So let's take both of those for a moment. First off, if that's the case, then are people who operate on patients in the OR just morons? Why are they wearing masks all the time? Why is everybody, when you go into an OR, why is everybody when you go into a delivery room wearing a mask? Okay, that would be my first question, Biggie Butters. Okay, clearly, now, I think you are right when you say, does a mask kill COVID? Does it stop bugs dead like Raid? No. But you can, all it takes is to go look at something like Mythbusters and watch the infrared, or I don't know if it's infrared, but watch the spray when somebody sneezes or coughs.
It's nasty.
And then watch... Right. And then watch with the mask, and then watch with the other person wearing a mask. Of course, some of it still gets out. But what they say is that the more of the shit that's infected that you get in, the more chances you have that it's going to take hold and make you sick. So yes, no one is saying you're an idiot, because we're not suggesting, or no one's suggesting that a mask is going to be perfect, just like a seatbelt is not going to guarantee you'll never die in a car wreck. But it is absolutely going to increase your chances of survival. The second part, the idea, this is the big part. This is what I think is the heart of it, but I haven't been able to understand it, where he says the masks are just a symbol of control. I
don't get that.
A symbol, like, I mean, that's some psychological, and again, I'm not mocking these people. This might be very similar to when a lot of them hate Hillary Clinton, a lot of them hate the Democrats, because they feel that political party and people who vote for that political party look down on them and think they're stupid and think they're idiots and all that stuff, right? I think that's marbled into this, because as somebody who doesn't think that way, it's almost like they think there's somebody sitting in some kind of big throne going, I am, a dictator and I want to control you. And instead of making you hop on one foot, I'll make you wear these little masks. It's like that. I mean, but I know, but at an emotional level, there's because you've heard this, right? You've heard, it's control. They want to control. They're saying put a mask on so you don't get sick and you don't get other people sick. If they wanted to control you, man, why wouldn't? I mean, seriously, it's kind of the same reason when people say the Democrats stole the election. If let me just do this real quick. If the Democrats stole the presidential election, but they didn't steal the Senate. They didn't steal enough seats in the Senate to give them filibuster-proof control. Okay, interesting. If 9/11 was a hoax and it was only meant to go in to invade Iraq, then how come the government came out and said Saudi Arabians were the ones on the plane and they didn't say this was done by Iraqis, right? If this was meant to control you, and again, none of these things are beyond belief that the government would lie to you. Of course, the government lies to you all the time, but it doesn't lie to you about every single thing. If the mask were meant, if the government wanted to control you, everybody has a cell phone. They would just start taking money from your bank and you wouldn't even know about it. They would start they would start taking things that you say and putting them on social media to shame you. And it's like, we'll release this if you don't do what we say. The idea that a mask is controlling, I mean, the guy who's controlling or the girl who's controlling must have a weird fucking fetish, because I've never heard, like, if you have the ability of the United States government to control, and by the way, this is worldwide, so I guess it's the new world order. That's a hell of a dumb way to control somebody.
I got to be honest with you, Jaffe. The mask control, and again, I use this on my thumbnail. The mask being the new symbol of fascism or tyranny. I'm like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, it's a mechanism to prevent spread of disease. That's it. And that's the part that I just can't figure out where that thought process comes from, because in my mind, I'm like, okay, here's why you should wear a mask, because here's the data points to it that masks prevent the spread of, like you said, the shit that comes out of your mouth. Yeah. But people really think it's a control mechanism. People think that getting vaccine is the government trying to control you. I'm like,
but I think that's the thing, is you have to look deeper. Like, there's a guy in your chat says, yup, again, sound like an Ewok, says, masks don't bother me. Distancing doesn't bother me. Trying to stop me from working from shutdowns does bother me, right? I just want to work. So I think fundamentally, not everybody, but there's always, not always, but there's oftentimes there's something deeper happening. I think a lot of people on the left, including myself, progressives like myself, get caught up on the surface. And it's like, this is a guy who's saying, maybe fundamentally, there's a lot of people who go, I need to work and this is stopping me. A lot of people, more people, I think it's safe to say, who are progressive have a higher income. Not always, but I do think there was a study done, or a number of studies done, that suggest that if you tend to vote liberal, if you tend to be progressive, if you tend to be democratic, you usually have, at a majority level, higher income earners. It doesn't mean there aren't rich as fuck Republicans. Of course there are. But in that, I think it's easy for someone like me to say, stay at home, work from home, wear a mask, do all this shit, because even when I worked for a company, they're all supporting that. But you work at McDonald's, you work at the car wash, you work at the auto clinic, you don't have that advantage, right? So those people are getting hit hard. And the ironic part is, it's the Republicans. Like, I would be fine if our taxes went up in order to pay people below a certain income threshold because of COVID. Every month they get money, right? But what's happening is they're seeing real ramification from their kids' educations, because they can't afford to have their kids at home and do homeschooling. They've got an 8-year-old. They can't leave the kid at home, but they can't not go to work. What are they going to do? There are very practical things that the government has not done a good job of helping people solve. And it has totally made it very easy for all this conspiracy bullshit to come in and take root, because who else is listening to these people? At least there's someone offering. It's like God. It's like an explanation for why things are crazy. Well, in light of nothing else, I guess I'll believe the guy who says there's people up in the sky throwing thunderbolts. In light of the government going, you can't work, but we're not going to pass a program that gives you money every month if you make below a certain amount to make sure you and your family are okay.
That's frowned upon if you do that, though, Jaffe. It's frowned upon to help people here. I don't get that either.
I understand, but it's ultimately, I'm saying that's what's, I think, for at least a guy like Yup, I think there's a lot of people who are going, what do you want me to do? My kids can't go to school. I can't leave them at home. I have to work. And you want to shut down the country for another, and I think we should shut down the country. But the fact that we don't give money per month is ridiculous. We are the richest country on the planet other than China. We should be able to give money to people to keep us safe. And frankly, you know what? The liberals and the progressives like myself, I think we should be ashamed of ourselves, in that we shouldn't get to say, wear a mask, social distance, without completing the sentence and say, and give people who need it a monthly stipend until this is done. And those three things, social distancing, masking, and giving people money at the end of every month, then I think you're going to start getting a lot more people interested in hearing this. But if you just say, wear a mask and don't go to work, and you're on your own, hell, if I didn't have any money and my kids were struggling, I'd probably be like, that somebody's at least speaking my language. I'd believe the conspiracy shit too.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Jeffy. I'm gonna get the super chat from Sianu.com with the $3 super chat. Says, by the power of Thor and Zeus, give me your virgins. Okay.
Okay. I don't know any virgins anymore. I'm 50.
I do want to ask you another question, Jaffe, before we switch topics, because I do want to talk some gaming here since we have you on tonight.
Yeah.
What do you think about this idea of mandates? And by the way, I do find it funny. I kind of chuckle here on Facebook when I see people saying these companies are, they're violating my rights by requiring me to get vaccinated in order to work. I'm like, that's not how that works. But what do you think? I mean, because now I think it's United Airlines is requiring their U.S. employees to all be vaccinated now. We're seeing even at the state level here where I live, we're seeing the governor. I live in the state of Maryland. Governor Hogan is saying if you work, state workers need to be vaccinated. What do you think about a vaccine mandate?
I think it's necessary. I think, of course, I think again, but you can't do it. Well, okay, here's what I think. I think a private company should be able to say whatever the fuck they want. If they don't want you working there, if you're not vaccinated, that's up to them, right? If you don't like it, that's fine. Go get another job. They don't owe you employment, okay? But at the same time, if you are not just, and frankly, I'll even go further because I'm a fan of welfare. I know a lot of Republicans don't like welfare, but I think it helps some people, okay? Well, I think you need right-wing welfare, right? If you're somebody, it doesn't have to be right-wing, but more often than not, the right-wingers are the ones in this case that don't want to get vaccinated because they don't believe in it, right? So fine, if you're a right-winger and you don't want to get vaccinated, you don't get to work at your job, but you fall below that income threshold and we'll give you a monthly payment. I mean, we need to stop painting the other side so negatively because I'm not saying again, people are stupid. There's some people who are evil assholes. I'm not acting like, oh, let's just be kumbaya fucking yah. There's some dicks out there. But the idea though of saying, I do think we have to have companies say you have to be vaccinated. If you want to fly on our fucking airline and you don't show us a card, that's fine. Go, free market. I'm sure Spirit Airlines or something will open up and say, come fly with us. You don't have to be vaxxed. Great.
Spirit Airlines.
Great. Yeah. That's fine. That's what it should be. That's free market. That's capitalism. But a company should have a right to tell their employees what they can and can't do in terms of making the workplace safe. You can't bring a gun to work, right? I mean, that's most companies, right? But I think the government should then step in if you are not just, taking the piss and you genuinely are like, well, I can't work at McDonald's anymore because I'm very scared to get the vaccine. And the government is like, let me send you a bunch of shit to tell you you're wrong for being scared. Nope, I'm still scared. All right, you've fallen below the threshold. You're going to be getting this much money a month now to make up for the fact that you're not vaccinated. I mean, I'm down with that. I'm down with that because we're going to, how much corporate welfare do we give out in this fucking country every year?
A lot.
Could we please start giving that? Could we please start giving that to the individuals in this goddamn country in order to allow them to have some dignity and not be treated like shit? I think there's value in that, but it's all fucked.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
interesting when you bring up the thing of mandates. I see this a lot, like Biggie Butters in the live chat saying, "Nazis, anyone? Show us your papers."
Yeah, I mean that speaks to somebody. Well, yeah, I mean, Biggie Butters, for whatever his value is a talking point parrot. Right? He's not learned, he's not researched, and that's okay. I mean, people are busy, they have lives. But even what he writes here where he's saying, what about the whatever happened to my body, my choice? That's the slogan the abortion people have used for years. But it's not the same because a woman carrying a baby to term or choosing to abort it, especially early enough that it's legal, affects, depending on your religious views, affects one person or two people, or maybe three people if you believe the baby has consciousness or whatever. If you choose not to get vaccinated, we all suffer. If you choose to get behind the wheel of a car with alcohol in your system, we all suffer. I like pot a lot, but I agree with the fact that it should be illegal to drive while you're high. So yes, it's my body, my choice. But the minute my choice begins to run the risk of hurting other people, we have a whole history of laws and traditions that say there is a line you can cross where it starts being dangerous for other people to deal with that level of freedom.
That's a great
And
point,
in that,
Jaffe.
yeah, I mean, it's just, but this Butters guy, he thinks he's right. And I'm not trying to call you out. Well, I am, but I'm not trying to make him feel bad or anything. I'm bringing this guy up because he reflects a sort of archetype in this culture right now, where these people will go out and they'll say these things and they'll talk about these things, and they'll act, but they clearly haven't really thought them through. And if you think them through, it's pretty clear, what he's talking about, which is he hasn't really thought through it.
Yeah, he's saying he called me out. He likes to debate, Jaffe. But that goes to my point when you say, the ripple effect to society, right? Okay, when you talk about the difference between the two, it also makes me think of the people who say you're violating my rights by making me wear a mask. And I'm like, no, your individual rights don't supersede the well-being of the greater community that you live in.
Well, I wish they could show us the rights we're violating. What rights are you referring to? Is there something in the Constitution
no.
Because I guarantee you the Supreme Court's done a lot of shit that a lot of people disagree with. And they're like, hey, we don't think Citizens United is great either. Some of them say, but constitutionally, you can't really argue with certain things. If you want to change it, change the Constitution. So if they're right, trust me, if their rights were being violated, these court cases would have stuck. But it's like, no one's violating your rights. If you can't walk into Trader Joe's and wear a mask. Now, there potentially could be, I guess, maybe a case, and I'm not a lawyer or even close to a lawyer, maybe in a public space, if you walk into a courthouse, can the government tell you have to put on a mask? I know they are. And so there must be some legal acceptance of that. But certainly a private business isn't violating your rights. Don't shop there. They don't owe you a place to shop for your fucking groceries. So,
yeah, that's a great point, Jaffe. I do want to pivot here and talk about
before you pivot. I have to address one guy.
Yeah, go ahead.
One guy. This is, and again, I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm saying be careful of these blanket statements that mean nothing. Like when people say follow the money. Follow the money makes people feel really smart, like they're being really like you got the skinny. It's like, okay, but explain yourself. This guy says, Walid Mishal says, we are being lied to by the government and the media. Don't trust them. Yeah, we are always lied to by the media and the government. And I don't trust them about certain things. But that doesn't mean don't trust them about everything. And Walid or whatever the fuck your name is, unless you can point to a valid reason why in the case of COVID and mask and vaccines that you're being lied to by all these people, and you can prove what they're saying is wrong, and you can prove the value of ignoring their reporting, then I think you're just a guy, shouting on a street corner conspiracy theories, and you're a fucking moron. So,
which is what we see in social media a lot, by the way. I mean, that's what I see on Facebook. A lot of those blanket statements, and you see people just feeding off of it on Facebook,
yeah,
and Twitter. So
this guy says the vax doesn't even work.
What?
Sure, the vax works.
Does work.
Here's how you know the vax works. 99% of people in hospitals with COVID right now are unvaccinated. The people who are getting COVID, who are vaccinated, and there aren't a lot of them, but the ones that are getting breakthrough cases are not having the same kind of life-threatening illnesses. They're getting sick, and they're having to be in bed for a couple of days.
So he's saying, look at Israel, but in Israel, it's the same thing. People that are vaccinated aren't the ones in hospitals right now. Majority are not, right?
That's exactly right.
And so I don't understand. Like this is the part that kind of drives me crazy. I'm like, it's like you see this. It's in front of us. I mean, there's no hospitals are reporting this.
And let's say, lying. Yeah. And let's say for a brief moment, let's say that this Walid guy is saying, like if the government came out and said, if Fauci or the World Health or whoever you trusted came out and said the vaccines were great, but now because the Delta variant, we need new vaccines, right? Why would you not believe them? Again, this is science. This is how it works. This is how you deal with mutations. And like you said earlier, these things are mutating because there were people who didn't get vaccinated. And every time it affects somebody not vaccinated, it runs the risk of creating a new virus that fucks everybody because that virus won't get hurt by the vaccinations we currently have, right? But they can't offer logic for why. It's like, well, okay, so if that's the case, if the vaccines don't work, then why are they giving them to us? Oh, well, they want to control us. How? How is a vaccine that doesn't work going to control you? Is it going to... I mean, is it going to send a little like Wrath of Khan earworm into your brain? And
Bill Gates is controlling us.
It's so dumb. It's
no,
so
but you know,
dumb.
Jaffe, but the thing with like he's saying the vaccines don't work. It's like, but they do. Like this is where I don't understand how we got to a point we don't trust science anymore. And
well,
the science is clear, Jaffe. You know, it prevents severe illness and death. It's still very good at doing that right now. The vaccine, like some Gander the Lord said, the vaccine's not a cure. It's not a cure. They never promised. They never said it was going to be the cure. The end goal was,
I'll tell you what. You prove to me you're not vaccinated, and I'll prove to you I am. And then let's walk into a COVID hotspot. And if you get sick and go to the hospital and I don't, you owe me $10,000. How about that? I'll make that deal with you.
Oh my goodness.
I'm just saying. I mean, I'll make that deal with you because it's like
He's saying blood clots, you know, I can't pronounce it. Myocarditis. I can't pronounce it. The inflammation of the heart is what it is.
Myocardial.
Yeah. Some of the reported side effects that they want to force.
But
they're not. No, those are very rare. Very rare.
Well, not only that, but look at this guy. Barbecue Sauce says this is the problem. Barbecue Sauce. I'm not trying to be a dick to you. Think about what you just wrote. Though. Yeah, but think about what he just wrote. He says, control us. Do you see what they're doing in New York? They're controlling who can go to a restaurant based on if you got the shot or not. Now think about this for a moment. Do you think Joe Biden and the government benefits if you can't go to New York and eat at a fancy restaurant? No. Do you know who suffers? The restaurants that are saying we're going to cut our clientele down by anywhere from 20 to 40%, depending on where in the country they are.
Well, New York City's mandating this now. The New York City government's made it. Yeah,
I understand that, but the idea that the restaurant is saying, like, why is the government? What he's saying is the government doesn't want you to eat at specific restaurants. I mean, what logic is this? If the government wanted to control you, they would say, and there were countries that were doing this at the beginning. They were saying, you can't leave your home if you have tested positive. If you go to Australia and you fly into Australia, at least according to Alana Pierce, you have to be in a hotel in quarantine for 2 or 3 weeks before you can get out. While I still think that's safety, I would at least go, okay, you could kind of look at that like the government wants to control you. But going, you have to be vaccinated to go inside a restaurant. Oh, yeah. That's really fucking controlling. I don't understand.
Let me ask you one thing, Jaffe, and I do want to pivot, but New York City, you want to pivot?
No, well, I asked your question, then I'll shut up about it.
Oh no, I was going to say with New York City though, they did the mayor, I forget the mayor's name in New York City, but he did institute. Yeah, Blasio mandated that if you go to a gym or restaurant, you have to show proof of vaccination.
Yeah. So
people are very kind of up in arms about that. Like they feel like that's intrusive. The government should be mandating that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can understand that. I think it's up to the private business to say that. But the fact of the matter is, you know what? Here's what I'll say. No, I don't agree. Here's the problem with it. It goes back to the sort of the monthly stipend. It's okay, New York, if you want to force people to say you can't go to the gym if they're not vaxxed. But you got to make sure that gym owner can stay in business. You got to pay him the corporate welfare you're paying Amazon and everybody else, right? It's okay to say that this restaurant has to allow people in that are only vaxxed. But that restaurant doesn't deserve to suffer because of it, right? If we can afford to help that restaurant stay afloat. I think a lot of it does come down to the government not being very responsible to its citizens, especially given that they're so responsible to all these corporations instead. But we'll pivot. Yeah, I mean, we're not going to get any new information. It is what it is, you know.
No, and this is interesting. I'll bring this last point. He says, "Look, this is to you, Jaffe." He says, "Look what's happening in Australia. The military is enforcing lockdowns. That's coming here."
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, I don't think that's coming here. I mean,
I don't think it's. I don't think it's coming here either. Just like we didn't have people saying you have to stay in a hotel room for 2 weeks in America. But you know, I mean, look, I mean, you know, when is it okay, right? When is it okay? I mean, you literally had in New York last summer, you had cops going down the street and literally shooting gas canisters in people's homes that were standing on their own porches, wanting to watch all of the shit go down. I mean, ultimately, if we don't want the military flying over and keeping people inside, that's fine. But then, you know, you're not really offering a better solution. It's not a smug attitude, Crazy Joe. It's just that you guys don't offer anything. Crazy Joe says the smug attitude from David is laughable. It's not smug, man. It's the fact that, you know, I understand your position, but the only way for you to be satisfied with someone that you're discussing this with is for someone to acquiesce to a bunch of horse shit. I mean, if you got some facts and figures that don't come from some weird ass website, great, but show them to me.
Yeah. And then, you know, Waleed with the, you know, any long-term side effects, no one knows yet because it's still being studied by guinea pigs. Again, that's just, I think that goes back to Jaffe, people getting information. I think where he's getting from, and I'm assuming he's getting it from like places like social media or chat rooms where this kind of chatter is happening back and forth, because that's not necessarily the case if you look at some of these data points of these vaccines. But that's a whole, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole with him. That's another.
And that's what they want to do. Yeah. Biggie Butters is like, you're only offering the government and media positions. Well, what position would you like me to offer? You want me to offer the position of the woman that stood on the steps of somewhere in Washington and said that hydroxychloroquine or whatever the fuck it is,
hydroxychloroquine,
will cure this. And this is the same woman that says, if you like, you can have babies with Satan and there are demonic sperm. What facts? I'm not joking. I'm not being hyperbolic.
I remember that she said that.
Right.
You're talking about the lady who's in the White House, right?
Yeah. Even the guy who is attributed, who's like, I invented one of the vaccines, is like, oh, this vaccine doesn't work or whatever. That's been debunked. It's just like, show me some facts, man.
Yeah. There's a lot. That's the thing. There's no facts to a lot of these comments. And anyhow, I do want to get another super chat from Italian Clowns, $10 super chat. Thank you for that, Clowns. It says, when government cameras went up everywhere, all conspiracy theorists wanted to wear face masks. Now with COVID, they think it's control. I'd rather stay covered. I don't like cameras and facial recognition. Thank you for that super chat, Clowns. All right, Jaffe, let's pivot here. I want to talk about Activision and Blizzard, because that's been in the news a lot.
And Ubisoft. And Gone Home and Fulbright. I mean, it's on and on and on.
I mean, it's this thing is I think it's going to get, at least for Activision Blizzard, I think it may get even worse for them as this thing kind of goes on. There's a second lawsuit now. Yeah, there's a second
from
lawsuit
shareholders.
Shareholders, yes,
that's right.
So
and they lost sponsors this last weekend. It's just for esports. So who knows how much money? But it was I want to say it was Nike or McDonald's. No, it was Coca-Cola pulled out.
Coca-Cola,
and Allstate, the insurance company. So these weren't like Fred's tuxedos down the street. These were, these were meaningful sponsors. And they're like, we need to wait and see which way the wind's blowing, because working with you guys at the moment is kind of a bad look for us. So
So it's and then it's interesting. Like there was that article Kotaku put out with the remember the Cosby room. Now I think this was pre-Cosby like fiasco when that picture was taken. I think. Although I think there's been rumblings of Bill Cosby and his wrongdoings for years.
That was 2002 was the first time it was public that people were, hey, Cosby might be doing something. And 2013 was when that picture was taken. To be fair, though, that picture, there's no way to know with what we know whether or not, because, Blizzard's excuse is, oh, well, we were talking about his ugly sweaters because the floor has an ugly carpet, and that's why we called it the Cosby Suite. I'm like, okay, you called it the Cosby Suite because the carpet was ugly to the point that you would take a picture of Bill Cosby and frame him, and then which they have a framed picture of Bill Cosby. Okay, all right, I don't buy it, but it's possible. It's possible though. It's possible.
Yeah. So they're in battle 2 lawsuits now with the state of California. Their shareholders just sued them. There have been some changes. They let go of the vice president of global HR. Is it Mike Ibarra? And I forget the other person who's kind
Mike
of like
Ibarra is a very good guy. I like Mike a great deal. He was at Xbox for a long time.
Yep.
He and a woman who I don't know what her name is, are now running the place. And the woman who worked for the Trump administration, who released that tone deaf letter that even Bobby Kotick called out and said, this letter is ridiculous. She has stepped down from her kind of, not as her job, but one of her sort of task was sort of an inclusive, bringing women in and all this stuff. They're like, you're probably not the best person to lead that right now. So she stepped down from that. So, I mean, things are happening, but frankly, Bobby Kotick, the shareholders need to get together and say, Bobby Kotick, you're done.
Yeah. That's actually where I was going to ask you, like, does Bobby need to go? Because, and did he know, like, is it a situation where, he's a guy up top? Did he know? Or was it like, hey, you know what? I'm not involved.
Again, doesn't matter.
Delegating.
Doesn't matter. Right? Because let's put it this way. There was a report that came out, 2 days ago on Friday, that said the people at Blizzard knew. Like, well, the assistant to Mike Morhaime, who was the head of Blizzard, is on record now saying, I told him about this stuff.
Oh, wow.
Ages ago, and nothing got done. But whether Bobby Kotick knew or not, doesn't that tell you all you need to know? He's either an absent father and he's allowing this shit to happen and he's ignorant to it, which suggests you're probably not the best guy to be leading the company. You're making us a lot of money, but you're starting to hurt us in the pocketbook a little bit with your inability or unwillingness to actually manage the humans, or he knew and he did nothing. Both of them are bad. Both of them are worthy of getting him out of there. And I think he's just a bad person in general. I mean, that's not a reason to fire someone, because I have a hunch. Yeah. But there's so much smoke around this guy, whether it's the Jeffrey Epstein book where his name appears in Jeffrey Epstein's book, whether it's the fact that he has numerous times given China whatever they've asked for in order to make more money, whether it's the fact that he is making more money that even his watchdog groups are saying you make too much money as an executive. I mean, there's a lot of things about
like 150 million. I think
he made 150 or 120 million last year. Jesus. And they're just like, you didn't really earn that or deserve that. And they were going to have a vote on it to determine whether or not he has to not get all of it or pay some of it back. And then I know they've tabled the vote. So there's just enough about this guy that makes me kind of go, I think he's bad fucking news up and down. And I don't know that. I don't have any evidence other than what I just told you. But I would love to see him out of there. Only if no other reason, because the thing about this, the Blizzard guys were told, according to the reporting, and it's just one guy, right? According to the reporting, the assistant to Morhaime told him, this is what's going on. And then he also said, but there got to a point at Blizzard where there were people who were like rock stars that were so responsible for making us so much money that they were just untouchable. Okay. So if Morhaime knew this and said nothing, and then what are the chances that Kotick didn't know anything if the fucking head of Blizzard, who I guess is second in command to Bobby Kotick, knew this? Come on. But even if he didn't, it just shows that he's inept and he should be gone. I think he needs to go.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he needs to go too. I think there needs to be a clearing of leadership, if you will, because this has gone on for such a long time. But I guess, like, how did this? It's just amazing that you talked about Ubisoft. You talked about there's even there was allegations at Rockstar. Who's the guy at that Sony Quantic Dream?
Oh, David Cage. That's not Rockstar though.
Or is that but also Rockstar too. There was like allegations of some behavior issues at Rockstar. do you think is this a bigger problem in the industry that we're aware of, Jaffe, you think, or is this kind of isolating to a few bad actors in the industry right now?
No, I think it's a problem, but I think it's a problem in America. I think it's a problem in the world.
Yeah.
I think, and stuff people don't want to hear. They don't want to hear about things, and I get it, but they don't want to hear about, they don't want to hear about patriarchy and misogyny, and they don't want to go down that road. But they're, and again, I'm not a guy who's just like, I saw the movie The Red Pill. I get it. There are definitely things in our society that are stacked against men. But the fact of the matter is the majority of them are benefit males in this society. And when you have a company that, or a number of companies that consistently reveal this, whether it's games or movies or television companies, there was a problem at HBO for a while. They got rid of the guy. Ultimately, I think we talked about this on my stream the other day. There's two parts of it. There's a part where it's absolutely unacceptable and you just have to start getting rid of these people. And I think it's the term reaping. Like there's a mass exodus or pushing out, which I guess is reaping, of these people. And I think that's good. I think, unfortunately, though, if you still have guys who are running this, like Yves Guillemot at Ubisoft or Bobby Kotick at Activision, it might just be performative. I think we need to get rid of these people and make it clear this is not acceptable. The problem becomes, though, is first off, it's a business and the market doesn't really care, right? I know it's just NeoGAF, and NeoGAF is a very specific kind of website compared to other websites, but NeoGAF had a poll that said, now that all this stuff about Activision has come out, what are the chances that you won't buy the next Call of Duty or whatever? And the vast majority of people were like, it was like 80% are like, well, I'm still going to buy it. Right. So we can complain about it, but ultimately that's performative too. Because if we really cared, like I care very much about LGBT rights. I don't go to Chick-fil-A anymore. As much as I love Chick-fil-A's French fries, and I grew up eating Chick-fil-A's French fries because they're a Southern company. The minute all that stuff came out about who they are as a company, I'm not saying I've hit their bottom line. I'm one guy, but there is a point where you can say you're opposed to this shit and then you continue to give them money. And I think that's really the reason these people stay in power. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is the best-selling Assassin's Creed ever. And that game came out after all of these accusations were made public. Nobody cares. They just want their entertainment. And again, I don't shame people for that because it goes back to the thing we were talking about with Trump and the vaccines. Life is hard. Life is scary. Life is chaos. People need their escape because we don't offer in our society a way to relieve that fear and that pressure. And so I get it. I get why you want to lose yourself in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. But what you don't get to do, though, is do that and still act like you're horrified at the conditions of these places. Because if you're really horrified and you're not just performing, you would stop giving them money for what they do, because that's the only way to actually stop them. I mean, anybody who gives Activision money in this day and age, you're basically giving money to 2021's, you're helping support the modern day Nazi party, which is not Activision, but it's the Communist Party in China. If you play a 10-cent game, you are actively, not even peripherally, you are actively helping support the disappearance, torture, murder, depending on the day, of over 1 million Muslims in Northwest China, right? I mean, that's what your money is going towards when you say, yes, I want this. I want this. I want to give you money, 10 cents. That's just the truth.
So, Jaffe, do you think that, again, there's changes happening right now? We see that.
Yeah.
But are you saying that there may not be, well, let me rephrase. Do you think there won't be meaningful changes if consumers don't vote with their wallets? So, you know what, Activision?
Oh my God, of course there will be no changes at all. Why would there be?
So you think even with, you mentioned Ibarra's a great guy. He's kind of in a leadership role now.
Yeah.
Do you think that this is still going to be the culture there at Activision where we, 2 years down the road?
I think they will try to do the best they can. I don't think anyone's fundamentally evil, but I think fundamentally these people are in it to make money and to be successful. And ultimately, if Mike Ybarra's style and this woman's style of kindness and fairness doesn't yield financial results, he's gone. Right? I mean, that, literally, this is only a problem because it was made public, because the California Labor Department or whatever sued them. If this lawsuit would have never come out, this would still be going on. So it's absolutely, they don't care. Are you kidding me? They don't give a fuck. They might, as individuals, when they go home at night and see their kids and they're having dinner and it's like, yeah, man, people are really hurting. But they'll still go, you know what, though, I really want that new boat and I really want my bonus. And if I fired this guy who's just making awesome fucking work for us, we're going to be below our numbers. I mean, that's how a lot of these people operate.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. It's not,
I mean, it's not just Activision, it's just everybody. It's everybody.
Yeah.
It's how you act in a capitalist society, unfortunately, when there's no social safety nets. That's what you get. You get dog eat dog, and the dogs are eating the dogs.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point, Jaffe. It's just, I've thought about it. Like, I've kind of gone back and forth myself because I have a daughter, and I'm like, you know what? Fuck that. Like, if someone did that to my daughter, there'd be a problem. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I might show up to her job and there might be words, right? And so I'm thinking, like, do I buy another COD game? Do I play Warzone still? And I've kind of gone, and I've had this discussion with I won't mention his name live, but somebody I podcast with on a regular basis, and he said, because I understand that. He goes, but what about the people who are working there? That could be negatively impacted by this.
I think that's at best, that's a valid concern that's misplaced. At worst, it's just a way to allow you to continue doing what you do without feeling bad about it. Because ultimately, the people at Activision Blizzard who are working there, if you do nothing, nothing's going to change. So what you're basically saying is, it's like those people may have jobs, but look where they have to work. They have to work in a place where a woman's vagina was photographed and sent around to a Christmas party and she killed herself. They have to work at a place where executives show female employees butt plugs and lube when they go on a business trip. Can I see your phone? Yeah. So it's like, yes, let's keep that machine going so some people don't lose their job. Pull the Band-Aid off, let them go get a job at a place that's more kind and inclusive. Because ultimately, if you don't do anything, they're just going to keep doing what they do. Why would they not?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point.
Oh, Chinese.
So, is that Tim Pool?
Is that who?
Who is that? Wait, are you live?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I don't mind, but who do you think this is?
No, who is it?
I'm on Basement Radio Arcade Podcast. But who do you think it is?
Okay.
All right, baby. You shut my door, please. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting how this thing plays out. But again, that's kind of been my thought process is, do I play these games? Do I go back to Warzone? Even though I'm not buying anything on Warzone per se.
Yeah, I mean, look,
we just playing it. I mean, it's engagement still, right? That means something to these companies, So I don't know.
I struggle with it too. I mean, I don't buy their shit anymore. I have a contact over there that gives me shit for free. And I stream it because I'm like, well, my stream is interested. But the fact of the matter is I'm still helping promote their shit for free. And I'm not like PewDiePie. I don't have a massive audience, but it's a big enough audience that even if it's an audience of one, morally speaking, I'm still contributing. I mean, I'm not perfect. I understand. I understand this is really fucking hard. Mm-hmm. And we, I think I am more aware of this stuff than certain people are. And in that I do try to change my behavior, but my iPhone isn't clean. You can't buy a cell phone that in some way or another was 100% ethically created. Yeah. Even the most ethically sound cell phones are problematic. Mm-hmm. I genuinely love getting in bed at night before I go to bed and scrolling on TikTok. Well, TikTok is an American company that's a subsidiary of a company in China. And I'm aware of that. And I debate every night, should I delete this app? Even though I don't pay them any money, I'm paying them engagement. I'm not saying I don't do it, but I'd like to think kind of in the same way that people say you shouldn't smoke. I don't smoke, but if I have a cigar every couple of years, it's better than smoking every day. But it's still, you shouldn't smoke at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Jaffe, how are you in time, by the way?
I think it's an artificial construct. It's a biological construct based on how we've evolved. I think when we die, we're going to realize that physicists actually suggest that time is like a book and everything's happening at the exact same time. We're just only able to perceive it in the moment that we're in. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah. I want to pivot from Activision to Blizzard here, or from Activision Blizzard to something Sean Layden said a couple weeks ago regarding Game Pass. You probably saw this article. He said Game Pass can't sustain $120 million games until it has 500 million subscribers.
Okay.
So I thought that was kind of interesting. Like I thought that maybe the math is off here. Like I didn't really understand kind of what he was getting at, because to me, if Microsoft's at 500 million subscribers, my assumption is they're probably raking a shitload of dough at that point, right?
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah. So
yes, I know DDP. He didn't catch the joke. I understand he was asking how much time I have left to talk.
I didn't catch the joke. I did not catch the joke.
Sorry, continue though, if you would please, about the Game Pass and subscription services.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of an interesting comment on Game Pass, because again, I didn't feel like the math kind of added up here. Did that kind of make sense to you, Jaffe, what he's talking about? Like, well, $120 million games, and it doesn't make sense to hit 500 million
and let's
subs?
be clear, 120 million is a bargain these days for PS5 games. Games on PS4 were AAA games were like 120 to 140, and some of those first party games got above 200 million. I can't tell you which ones they were, but the numbers that really stick with me from what Sean said is that, and when I learned this from him and then subsequent articles that wrote about it, the pie of console players is not growing, right? Consoles are making more money because of DLC and more expensive titles, and Fortnite's on there and everything. But the number of people who play console games since PS1 era has not really grown. It's hovered around, I think they quoted like 150 to 240 million, give or take. And that even that 100 million discrepancy exists because when you look at the numbers, there was that Wii period where you literally had almost 100 million people that were just casuals that came in, but that number dropped again when you went to PS4, Xbox One generation, right? So let's just, for conservatives, say there's 200 million. What changes is who gets the pie. Sometimes Sony gets more and Microsoft gets shut out. Sometimes it's a really good fight between all three of them. Sometimes the 360 wins at the beginning, but the number isn't really growing. Where it's growing is in cell phone games, mobile games, PC games. And so what he's saying is that if you can't increase the number of people that are playing console games, not just subscription-based games. He was saying when he left, he said making these 40, 50-hour games isn't sustainable. And he wasn't even talking about subscription models. He was just talking the amount of money we have to keep spending. I'm playing Ghost of Tsushima right now. I'm trying to finish it, or at least get it further in it before Director's Cut drops so I can upgrade. I must be 25 hours into that game, right? And what he's saying is the amount of money that it takes to make games at that scale is not sustainable. I think when you throw in a day one launch game where you're not getting, unless that subscription base is massive, you're not going to be able to make your money back only on that model. But I do think, though, that doesn't mean Game Pass doesn't work or PS Now doesn't work. I think there are games that make sense to launch day one on a service like Game Pass and PS Now that are still creative and awesome and cool and wonderful, but they are budgeted appropriately. And then there is a better way than Sony is doing it right now to take these big titles, just like movies, and waterfall them. You launch them for $70 and then you drop them to 40 and then you go greatest hits. And that, for the most part, unless it's an outlier, the audience can come to expect what that cadence of release is. Just like when you go to a movie, I'm not gonna go watch Shang-Chi because I'm like, I don't want to go to a theater and it's only in theaters. But you know what? I know it'll be on. I can rent it or buy it digital. I can buy it digitally in 70 days, and then if I want to wait to rent it, I can rent it in like 3 months, 4 months, whatever. So I think they need to do that. I think they need to say with something like God of War 70, then it's 40, then it's greatest hits. When it goes greatest hits, we're putting it on PS Now. And so you can play it as a, there's no reason for those big games not to waterfall those down. But I think Sony needs to do that, which they're not doing. And they also need to be able to make exclusive games that are day one so they can compete with Game Pass, which right now is putting everything day one. I mean, I've been playing Game Pass. I've been playing Xbox more than anything because every week there's like 3 brand new fucking games I can play. Psychonauts comes out next week. That's getting great buzz. I'm like, fuck, that's free. I mean, it's not free, but you know what I mean? It feels free.
It feels free. Yeah. So do you think then that Sony, because this is a conversation you probably have seen in your chat and have had on your show, and you see it in the community a lot. Sometimes it's fanboys arguing back and forth, but I do think there's a conversation to be had of where the industry is going, and if Sony needs to eventually pivot and adopt Game Pass, like that model. Like there's people that think if Sony doesn't do this, they're done. I'm not one of those people. I think that just given the size of the industry and how much money the industry's making, they could probably have models, coexist, right? Where you can have Game Pass and you could have, maybe Sony has a hybrid form of Game Pass where, they're not dumping games in day and date, but like you said, that waterfall approach where they, have.
But
like
I do think if they want to compete with Game Pass, they need day and date exclusives. Yeah. I think the days of it, here's how I know this, because when Apple TV first came out, we spent tons of time in the iTunes ecosystem renting movies every weekend. And then Netflix and HBO Max and all these things came out. And I use Apple TV as a piece of hardware now, but I can't remember the last time I've gone into the Apple iTunes store and said, let's rent a movie. Right? Because why would I do that? I don't need to do that. Right? So I absolutely think that you are going to struggle to compete in the subscription market if you don't have exclusives that are built for that specific audience. I think that's dumb. I think it's dumb. And they don't have to be these massive blockbusters, but even if you wanted to say, hey, we're going to do, a 4-hour, our exclusive for the month of March is a 4-hour 2.5D God of War Castlevania game. Right. It's we hired Way Forward. We paid Way Forward $7 million to make it. And it's great because Way Forward is amazing at 2D games. And it's a blockbuster license. It's a great character people love. Boom. There's your March exclusive, right? I mean, and that's day one. I think if they don't do that, they certainly will not catch up to Game Pass. And I do think, and that's why I brought up the Sean Layden thing at the beginning, the edge of the waterfall is coming up, and you see it because you see Ubisoft pivoting to service games with Assassin's Creed. Even though they had the best selling Valhalla last year of any Assassin's Creed, they are now doing Assassin's Creed Infinite. And you're a fool if you think that's not ultimately going to become Assassin's Creed everything, right? EA has already done this and pivoted to service games, unless you're talking about their small stuff. There's another company, all the third-party big companies are doing it, right? The waterfall edge is fastly approaching. And so either you grow that core audience of gamers in order to make it sustainable, or something has to give. And I don't think Sony's current way of doing it is going to survive. It might survive and win this generation. But I mean, it's just numbers, right? It's just the costs are going up. The gamers are demanding more. They want more hours, better graphics. The teams get bigger. The costs get bigger. What do you think is going to happen? The pie's not getting any bigger. There's more competition for your time. They're not going to be able to keep that going at that cadence. So if you don't have something, maybe it's not a Game Pass like service, but if you don't have something, then the people who come out with something as easy and low barrier of entry as a sub-service are going to eat their fucking lunch.
Yeah. I also think, I tend to believe that Jim Ryan's probably a very smart guy. I got to believe that that Sony's probably watching what's going on with Game Pass, right?
They are. The tricky part about it, from my understanding, and I'm not going to give any names or anything, is that you would be surprised, I think, because I was surprised. I have sat in offices of Sony executives very high up, like people you go, whoa, you know?
Yeah.
And what they have told me, some of their bosses and their bosses' bosses don't know about the industry, and don't know about certain aspects of gaming that are not right in front of them, would stagger you. You should not get to be an executive at a high level at a video game console company if you're not aware of what's happening with Roblox or certain cell phone games that are hits, or you're not aware of what's happening even with Apple Arcade, right? If you that is your competition as much as Xbox is your competition, because you're taking time away from people. If you don't know that kids today are less engaged with consoles and more engaged with PCs because of things like Discord and Among Us and all that, you don't deserve to be sitting in the captain's chair of Sony or Microsoft or any of these things, because it doesn't mean you need to go make Among Us. But when you say you think they're keeping an eye on Game Pass, I don't really know what they're keeping an eye on. Some of these guys are old school dinosaurs from sales and marketing days, and they look at it and they're just like, well, this is working. We put it in a box, we market it, we sell it, we get more money when it's digital. Great. It's like, dude, the landscape is rapidly shifting. And you need to get ahead of that. I'm not saying Jim Ryan is not a guy who's gotten ahead of it. I'm just saying that I don't know him, so I couldn't tell you. But clearly, Sean Layden's a guy who knows. Scott Rohde's a guy who knows. But I couldn't tell you what Jim Ryan knows about it. He might have a master plan. My understanding is this summer they're supposed to announce an upgrade to PlayStation Network that is going to sort of be a response in some way to the changes that are happening in the industry. But I don't know what they are. People at Sony have told me they've seen it and they've worked on it, and it's really fucking cool. But they told me that 5 months ago and I hadn't seen anything yet. So were they lying to me? Maybe. I don't know.
So is this like because I think Jim Ryan did say they're going to have an answer to Game Pass.
Well, he didn't say that. He said we'll have something to say about Game Pass, but that interview with GQ, he was just like, but now's not the time. That's what he said.
Okay.
So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but if I look at like what he's done more recently, the acquisition of, and I forget the name of the studio that does PC ports that they just acquired.
Right. I don't know the name either, but that's why they acquired them, to keep porting shit to PC. Yeah.
So you got to believe then that they are thinking outside of the console box, if you will.
They have to.
I mean,
yes.
I mean, because it makes sense. And I got to be honest with you, Jaffe. I don't like when people I have this conversation every time not every time, but many times I brought this conversation up of why it makes sense for Sony to go to, thank you, B Money says Nixus. When I've talked about how it makes sense for Sony to put their games on PC, and people are like, oh, but it devalues the brand. I'm like,
no, it doesn't.
It doesn't devalue the brand.
No.
You're targeting a different audience that probably has no inclination of wanting to buy a PlayStation console.
It might devalue your relationship with the brand because now your box doesn't make you feel as special as it once did. Fine. Maybe, yeah, emotionally I get it. But the brand PlayStation is now going to be put in front of a hell of a lot more people. And they're going to start to take in the quality of these games. So no, I think it kind of goes back to the vaccination conversation, which is there's an emotional component to this that they're not really getting at. It's like, what are you really upset about? You're not really upset it devalues the brand. What you're really upset about, because if you cared about the brand, if you cared about your enjoyment of PlayStation, you would celebrate any and everything that company does to make more money, because it would mean more money going into prototypes, to new developers, to new games, to making sure that Cory Barlog gets the raise he's demanding, or he's going to quit and go work for Apple in a studio in Culver City that's spending tons of money to steal talent in LA from games to work on their AR goggles. If you really cared about the brand at a selfish level, you would say, yeah, put it on a fucking toaster for all I care. Just keep making this shit, Sony. But It's not the brand they care about. It's the emotional connection that they have on the, intentionally Sony has built with their customers. and it feels like a bit of an emotional betrayal. And I think there is value in exploring that, because it's a very weak position to put yourself in, at the mercy of a corporation that doesn't give a fuck about you.
Can you say that again, Jaffe? People act like these corporations care about them. I'm like, they don't care. They
don't
care about your money.
As people, as humans, Sony was one of the nicest group of people I've worked with. Shu and Rhodey and Connie and Alan and Sean Layton. As humans, they are great. Mike Ybarra was at the competition at Xbox. I've had dinner with the guy. I've hung out with the guy at Microsoft offices. Super nice guy. But that's not Microsoft. That's not Sony. They still go into a boardroom and make decisions. And they're not like, well, wait a minute. There was a guy on the Basement Radio Arcade podcast, and he's not going to like this. And I care about him. He's my friend.
Yeah.
No, it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous thing. But again, I don't mock these people. I go, question that. Think about that. I mean, we all, and I'm not like some arrogant guy. I'm sure there's all kinds of programming happening in my head that I'm not even aware of, right? That I do things for reasons that I've been sort of brainwashed.
Subconscious.
Right.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's like, just take it from someone who's been bamboozled by this shit before.
Mm-hmm.
It's not real. You are being marketed to. And if you really do love the pure experience of the games, then you would want these games making as much money as possible, because you're going to get more of what you love. So
exactly. Yeah, no, I agree. The other interesting thing that came out of that article about Sean Layden was he talked about some of the consolidation that's happening in the industry right now, and how he thinks that's maybe potentially bad for diversity of games. And we see, Microsoft obviously making big acquisitions. The Bethesda one was, I mean, that, that was huge. I mean, what, 7.5 billion, right?
Mm-hmm.
We see Tencent kind of in the mix now. There's been some other,
there's, Tencent is spending a shit ton of money to get into the Western market. Absolutely. So is Smilegate. Smilegate is too. The guys who I worked with, Nick Conanellis, great guy, one of the best producers I've ever worked with, just co-founded a company called That's No Moon in LA and San Diego with the guy who ran Mike Mumbauer, one of the Sony divisions, a bunch of the guys who directed the last Call of Duty single player campaign. And they got their money, $100 million they got from Smilegate, which is a Korean company. But there's a lot of people that are investing, trying to get into the Western gaming market. Absolutely.
Yeah. And now you have Netflix. That's they're going to jump into gaming too. I don't know.
Yeah. But everybody wants a piece of the pie. That's for sure.
Yeah. So what do you think, Jaffe? Do you think it's a bad thing there? The consolidation, like what he's talking about, the consolidation of the industry, where it's going to hurt diversity?
No, it's dumb. It's a dance, right? It happens. Yeah. So, for example, it's been happening since the beginning, right? It's you build something, somebody wants it for themselves, your company gets bought, you sign on to the contract with something that's called a key man agreement, and that means if you are one of the stars of the company that is one of the reasons that your company was acquired, you have to stay at this company for X number of years after the acquisition in order to get your entire payout or your bonuses or whatever. So what ends up happening is either once that key man agreement is done, those people go, okay, well, the culture has gotten shitty, but I made a lot of money, and now I'm going to go off and start another company. You saw that with Mike Morhaime. You saw that with the two guys who left, the doctors who left BioWare. That happens a lot. Or the other thing that happens is you get a company that acquires you, like Sony, and they're a really good group of people. And, a lot of Naughty Dog has a high retention level post-acquisition. Insomniac looks like it's going to continue to have a high retention level. So I think there's always going to be people who want to make their own shit. The indie market is thriving. The AA market is starting to come back to life. And in that, diversity is alive and well. It's not like we're not getting weird, quirky games. We're getting them at a huge pace percentage now than we have in the past.
Yeah.
So I don't, unless I read his quote wrong or I didn't understand what he was saying, I don't know why it harms diversity. I think what harms diversity is the excessive budgets of these games that companies like Sony, which I love, and I'm playing Tsushima right now. It's one of my favorite games of all time.
It's a great
But
game, yeah.
the more money you spend to give people that, the less chances you can take. That's what harms diversity.
Yeah. And I think like with services like Game Pass, I think services like Game Pass can got to be champions of diversity, right? Where it offers a platform for like an independent developer to get their game featured, right?
But yeah, because you don't need I would have I was playing The Ascent the other day. Well, The Ascent is like sitting at a 74 Metacritic.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have dropped $60 on a 74 Metacritic unless it was something very specific. But it looked good. I played it. I don't love it. I'm probably never going to finish it or spend, tens of hours with it. But I'm glad I played it. I feel like I got my money's worth, my time's worth. It looks really good. It's probably one of the best cyberpunk executed environments I've ever seen in a video game. It blows the fuck out of Cyberpunk 2077 in terms of executing that fantasy of Snow Crash and Blade Runner and all that stuff. And so, yeah, that game was made by 12 people.
12 people,
right?
yeah.
I mean, so yeah, it allows. It reminds me of when you hear people like Roger Corman or people who made a lot of the like Trauma video back. I'm 50, so I was a kid of the video stores, even before Blockbuster. And one of the things that really allowed these indies to flourish was they said, if you put the Toxic Avenger in a good box next to Terminator 2, they're competing. Even though Terminator 2 was $100 million movie and we spent about $300,000 to make Toxic Avenger, the customer's just like, that looks cool and that looks cool. I guess I'll go with Toxic Avenger tonight. You know what I'm saying? So it really has democratized or it really has obliterated marketing in a lot of ways when you're talking about things like Netflix or you're talking about things like Game Pass, because you're just like, well, I'm already bought into the service. Let me try that. And the discoverability goes through the roof, which I think is phenomenal. One of the reasons I love these services.
It's interesting. You mentioned, kids are, consuming the medium different than we grew up consuming it, right? Like,
yeah,
our first, well, at least for me, my first experience was on a console, the Atari 2600. My dad brought it home. It was Pac-Man, Space Invaders, and
exact same experience. Yep.
Yeah. So for my entire life, it's always been consoles. And then at some point I got into PC gaming in the 90s. And my kids, their experience has been different. Their first experience in gaming was actually mobile. And they didn't get on console until I introduced that to them. Right. Because they saw me playing. Okay, dad's playing Xbox, he's playing PlayStation. They like video games because they played video games on their mobile tablets.
Right.
And I what he's playing looks cool because the graphics and everything, right? But Game Pass, it's interesting for me at least, and for my family, has been really cool because the kids are really engaged with it. Like they're like, it's like you mentioned, like you it's funny, like you mentioned the reference of going to the video store. And I remember before the days of Blockbuster where you had to pay a membership, remember?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And mom and pop video stores were great. I missed them, but yeah, I remember.
Yeah. And you walked in and you're right. Like it was kind of like, I remember being a kid and I was like, okay, that looks cool. That looks cool. And you're like, I'm going to go with that. My kids do that with Game Pass right now, Jaffe. It's the same thing.
And as a former developer, it's wonderful because, there are people that come into my stream all the time that are like, I only want to play the highest quality visual games. Great. That's great. But the majority of gamers don't require that. If they did, Fortnite would not have been a hit. Among Us would not have been a hit. Guitar Hero would not have been a hit. They just want to be entertained for a couple hours on a Saturday or whatever it is, right? And in that, you go to Game Pass, and it's like there's this game, The Descenders, which is a big hit on Game Pass, which is a downhill mountain biking game. There's no way in God's green
kids
earth.
Play that.
Yeah, I would not have dropped $20 or $10 on that game. Not because I think it's shit, because I'm like, I'm not really into mountain biking, whatever. But I heard enough people say, "Oh, that's really cool." I'm like, fuck it." I go on my cell phone, my iPhone. I go, I'm in bed at night. I'm like, I'll play that this weekend. Download. That's all I got to do. I sit down this weekend. There it is. I guess I'm playing Descenders. Oh, this is really fucking fun. I never played Crimson Skies before because I never had the original Xbox except for The Office.
Oh, Jaffe,
I
that's
love
a classic.
that. It's phenomenal.
So
it is so goddamn great. And I'm like, but they just dropped that on Game Pass. So I'm like, I've heard about it. I'll play it and I'm in love with it. Right. it is a delightful game changer, and it is going to, it's the future. And the only thing that's more the future is going to be streaming, but there are hardware limitations for certain people in certain parts of the world that are going to prevent us from a console-less future for a little bit. But we will get there, because if you've experienced good streaming or great streaming, and I have, it's magic. I mean, it's absolutely clear that that's where things are going. It's just going to take some time. But when you experience if you have a good experience with streaming, you're like, oh my God, it's the barrier of entry is gone. Go ahead.
I was playing Streets of Rage 4 at the doctor's office one day on my phone.
Isn't that amazing?
I'm like, this is fucking crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sitting in the toilet pooping and I'm playing Cyberpunk 2077 on Stadia. It's fucking crazy. And it looks great.
Yeah. I'm going to go to the super chat here, Jaffe, from Carlos Alvarado, the $5 super chat. Thank you for that, Carlos. It says, why is Jim's PS5 era around sales numbers and not a focus on retention, engagement, or subscription growth? Have their KPIs changed from the PS4 era? Any thoughts on that, Jaffe?
Well, I don't know what barometer he's using regarding there's not a focus, because like if you look at the Sony what do they call it? The Sony earnings call that they did this last week, there was a lot of discussion around the fact that PlayStation Network is down 1 million users from last quarter. There was a lot of discussion around engagement not being what it was. They're not the only company this quarter suffering. You saw Nintendo report something similar. Square Enix reported something similar. It's pretty clear that a lot of that is being driven by the shutdown pandemic levels of this time last quarter and last year that we're probably going to go back in because of what's happening with Delta, but for the last 3 or 4 months, it started to ease because of the vaccinations and stuff, at least if
people are going about.
Right.
Yeah.
And in that, it's like, oh, I don't need to stay inside all day. Let's go to the beach instead of stay home and play, PlayStation or whatever. So and that is brought up, but frankly, Carlos, Sony's business model right now is built around selling software for their hardware. Whereas if you look at Xbox, they've gone on record and said, we don't really care where you play our games. Yeah. You want to play Game Pass on your phone at the dentist's office? You want to play it on your PC? You want to play it on a new Xbox X? We don't give a fuck. We make our money by selling you a subscription and peripheral stuff and the actual games if you like them enough to buy them. So I think that's why it's just not what they're about anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And you're right about the numbers going down as it relates to the pandemic, because you're right. Like people are vaccinated, they're out more. I mean, like we are definitely my family at least, like we're still careful because the kids aren't vaccinated, but we are definitely out more than we were last year for sure.
Yeah,
because my wife and I are both fully vaccinated, we feel a little more comfortable, going places than we did last year. So
no, my kids have friends over now more often than they did.
Yeah.
But now we are starting to watch the news more and go, well, maybe we need to start dialing it back, even though we're vaccinated, Yeah. DDP says Game Pass being quiet says a lot. Well, they weren't quiet. What they said is they came out and said they did have growth in Game Pass this quarter. What they did not give you was numbers. So the growth was probably not very impressive. It may have been relatively anemic growth, but they did say they grew. They did say that.
Yeah. Yeah. The interesting thing is that it's funny. I'm reading the chat here. I'm not going to mention their names, but it's funny when you talk about Game Pass, some people get very upset about it. And
they do.
Yeah. Don't know why. It's like,
well, it's the emotional part. It's it's just like, same thing why they get upset about PC. Sony has done a very good job. Just like Nintendo did before them, of really tribalizing their audience. Xbox has as well, but Sony's done a better job at it. And they just really care about brand, and they've been conditioned to care about brand. And I think that's incredibly unhealthy. It's one of the reasons, again, I'm just, if somebody said, Jaffe, on your deathbed, if your kids and family members are taken care of, where do you want your money to go? I would want it to go to media literacy programs being taught in public schools, because the amount of things that corporations are able to get away with because they condition us by incredibly powerful PR tools and marketing tools, it's damaging. and it corrupts the very foundation of our society. So it's like, well, why not politics? Why not they? It's because it's all in there. The corporations that control the politicians wouldn't have the power they have if people weren't so emotional about buying a brand new car, or they weren't so emotional about getting the American dream and having the house.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, it's all sales tactics, man. And if we're, Sony, if kids were more conditioned to what those tactics were, they'd be able to look at Sony and go, Sony's great. I love it. It's a lot of fun. I'm grateful for it. I also like Xbox when they make something good. Sometimes I like Nintendo, but usually not. There'd be no, why would you attach emotion to it? Attach emotion to the games, maybe attach emotion to the people who made the games, but what box they're on, what you're basically saying, I'm so emotional because this group of executives decided to greenlight this. I mean, it's a ridiculous thing you're emotional about. It's just dumb, but I don't fault them, because if you're not raised in such a way that you encounter the curtain being peeled back and you see Oz behind the curtain as just a little old man from Kansas, why would you not believe it? It's powerful shit. I believed it when I was growing up. It did a lot of damage to me, actually, but thank God I evolved out of it.
Yeah. Jaffe, if I could have it my way, I would have everything on PC, and I would just play everything on PC. Nintendo, Sony first party. Well, Microsoft's already there now. Well, Sony's going there, but I would have everything on my PC. That would be my gaming utopia right there.
I mean, I have all of it, and I don't really differentiate. I mean, the one thing about PC that's great, I know a lot of people like to sit back on their couch with the big TV.
Yeah.
I don't really get that with PC, but what I adore about playing on PC, because I have 3 monitors, is it's just like I'm playing, and then I can be texting friends, and then the news is going, and I've got a show playing, and I have ADD, like literally, I have medicine for it right here. And I genuinely enjoy all of that sensory input coming my way. Whereas if I didn't play on PC, I would just have the console. Sometimes it's a little lacking, the noise that my brain desires. But I love PC gaming, though. I think there's so much more variety on PC gaming.
I was going to say that there's definitely more, like on Steam. There's so much variety. And on PC, one of the things I like, there's so much like content on Steam, like old content, like games I haven't played in years.
Yes,
that you can't find on console right now.
No,
that's what I love about the flexibility of the PC.
It's Steam, and it's itch.io. It's good old games. It's just this stuff that won't even, I've talked about this on my stream. I played a game from Red Candle Games, which was banned off of, Steam won't carry it. Good old games won't carry it because it's offensive to China. And so Red Candle Games finally said, fuck it. We're just going to put it out on our own website. And I don't know if they made any money off it, but I bought it from their website. You can't do that on console. You got to go through the Sony walled garden, the Xbox walled garden. And it's one of the best games I played this year. One of the best horror games I've ever played. It was called Devotion, not Detention. And so it's the minute you encounter PC gaming, if you love the medium, if you're not just like, I only love big AAA games, then I get it. I get why you would go PlayStation, because that's 95% of what they make. But if you just love games in general of all kinds, if you can afford a PC, I would get a PC, because everything's there for the most part. You'll miss out on certain things, but what you make up for it is well worth it.
Oh, I agree. Me going back to I gamed on PC in the mid-90s because of the first-person shooters. And just recently, because I'm a content creator, bought a PC 2 years ago. Yeah. And it was game changing for me. And I haven't looked back, and I love it. PC is probably my platform of choice, the one that I prefer playing. So
I can see that. There's Blue Moon says you can't play FIFA and Mario Kart on PC. Right. You're going to miss out on some stuff.
Well, you could.
Are you going to Mom's? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to call her in a minute because I think she might come over. Okay. Oh, okay.
You could play those games on PC, but
right.
There's workarounds to that. But I won't get into that. But yeah. So, but Jaffe, I want to say thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Great conversation with the vaccines, the current state of the U.S. in terms of politics and this pandemic, and obviously some great gaming conversation. So,
And as a
again,
reminder, go to at David Scott Jaffe, go to YouTube and type in David Jaffe. I stream multiple times a week. We have a show called Gabbin' and Games. I have a podcast. Follow me on Twitter, all that nonsense. If you're interested in my brand of shenanigans, I would appreciate your interest. Thank you very much.
yeah, absolutely. Give if you're not following David Jaffe, definitely give him a follow. I do really enjoy your content. By the way, great
Thanks, man.
conversations with Colin Moriarty. When you had
Yeah,
him on,
Colin is great to talk to. I've had him on a couple of times, and he's had me on his show. He's a joy to chat with. Yeah,
He
we
really
talked to
is.
Cliffy B. We talked to Romero the other day. I've got a bunch of new guests coming up in 2 weeks, so I'm bringing more guests on. So that's always a lot of fun to bring on industry people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's always a great perspective because I think the one thing that you bring to the table that a lot of podcasters don't, at least the ones I follow, so you've actually been in the industry. So you kind of like, I think how you say, you know how the sausage is made.
Yeah.
I think that's what you said. Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
just a great perspective. And it's great that you share that with people because sometimes there's just, podcasters don't have that perspective. So
No, I like it when I hear it from other people whether they're in movies or sports or whatever. So it seemed like it would be kind of a fun thing to do, and I'm loving it. It's fun so far.
Yeah. I'm going to give a big shout out to everyone in the live chat. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us this evening. Really appreciate the support always. If you're new to the show, subscribe, hit that bell notification so that you're alerted when we go live. BRAP goes live every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And also hit that like button if you haven't done so already. So don't forget to give Jaffe a follow on YouTube and on the Twitters. And we'll be back on Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern time for our regular scheduled BRAP. Everyone have a great rest of the evening, weekend, and enjoy your times playing video games. And we are out. Take care.